Okay, so here are some of my personal tips for solving these augmented matrices with this Gauss-Jordan elimination method. So these are my tips. Before you write the augmented matrix, be sure to write all of your equations with the variables on the left, and the constants on the right. And also be sure that your variables are in the same order. So if you have x, y's, and z's, and then your next one is z's and y's and x's, then you need to put them all back in order so that everything is x, y, z, or a, b, c, same order before you go to the matrix form. Try your best to always move from left to right through the columns, if you can do this without making terrible fractions everywhere. If you jump over to the right and try to work backwards, you might get in a situation where you undo something that you already did. And that's we never want to do that. If you have to move out of order, remember that you're heading for ones on the diagonal and zeros everywhere else. Once you've made a leading one, use it to create the zeros. So creating your leading one is where you can get a little bit creative. Like, how do I want to do that? Do I want to do that by multiplication? Do I want to do that by switching rows around? How do I want to do that? But don't be creative when you're making zeros. When you are making a zero, you should multiply that leading one by something, add it to the number you want to change to a zero, and eliminate it. That should always be the way you do that. Once you have ones and zeros where you want them, try not to use any operations that undo them, because at that point you're just working in circles, and these problems are long enough without doing that. Okay, so let's do a slightly bigger system. Let's do this 3x3 system using our Gauss-Jordan elimination method. So remember our process. We want to try to move from left to right, creating ones on the diagonals and zeros everywhere else. So our first task here is to turn this element, this is our pivot element, into a 1. Always check, if I were to multiply this whole row through by 1/2 to turn that into a 1, would I make terrible fractions everywhere? In this case, I wouldn't, because all of those numbers are divisible by 2. If you can do that, that's how I would recommend it. So I'm going to just take 1/2 times row 1 and make that my new row 1. Now, if some of those numbers were not divisible by 2, maybe I would want to get somehow creative another way, using multiplication and addition. But this is going to work out very lovely. If I take 1/2 times 2, I get 1. 1/2 times 4 is 2. 1/2 times 2 is 1. And 1/2 times 6 is 3. And that's all I have done here. I'm going to leave everything else alone. Now I have this leading 1. So again, first, create that leading 1. That's always your number 1 goal. Now, use that leading 1 to make the other entries in that column zeros. Use it, because you just created it and now it's time to use it. These are going to be the multiply add steps. So what do I need to multiply 1 by in order to eliminate a negative 2? 2. So I'm going to take 2 times row 1, add that to row 2, and that's going to become my new row 2. Here's where you're going to want to start doubling up so that you don't end up using 8 pages of paper for one problem. I'm going to do both of my zeros in the same step. So what do I need to multiply a 1 by to get rid of a 3? A negative 3. So I'm going to do a negative 3 times row 1, add that to row 3, and that will become my new row 3. And as you can see, to help myself keep organized and to keep track of everything, I write the row operations next to the row that I am changing so that I can now visually see this top row is not changing. I am using it to change the other rows. Now here's where you're also probably going to want to grab a calculator out, because you have a lot of multiplications and additions to do. So I might want to grab my calculator out to do all of this next work. So I'm going to take 2 times negative 2, add that to 1, or sorry, I'm going to take, I keep saying it incorrectly. I'm sorry. So I'm going to take 2 times 1, add that to negative 2. That's going to create my 0 here. But this starts to be a lot to write out, so you want to start doing these in your calculator. Okay, I want to do the same thing over here. I want to take 2 times 2, add that to 1, so I'm going to get a 5. And then I want to take 2 times 1, add that to 3, I get another 5. And I have to do it to this constant column as well. So I take 2 times 3, add it to 4, I get 10. Okay, so I got my 0 in that row, and I need to do it now to the next area. So now I need to do negative 3 times everything in row 1, add that to row 3. So I'm going to take negative 3 times 1 plus 3. I'm going to just, that gives me my 0. I'm going to take negative 3 times 2 plus 2. So that's negative 4. Negative 3 times 1 plus 1 is negative 2. And negative 3 times 3 plus 5 is negative 4. First column is in unit column form. Check, it's done. Okay, so my next step is to move down diagonally and to turn this next entry here, that needs turned into a leading 1. Again, my first check here is, can I be just very straightforward? Could I multiply this row through by a number to turn that 5 into a 1 and not make a giant mess? And in this case, I can again. Like, I'm lucking out a little bit. I could just multiply this row by a 5th, and it wouldn't create awful fractions everywhere. So that's really nice. That's where I'm going to move next. So none of my other rows are going to change. If I multiply 0 by a 5th, it stays as 0. 5 by a 5th is 1, 5 by a 5th is 1, 10 by a 5th is 2. So awesome, I've turned this next entry into a leading 1. Now I need to use that to turn the entries above and below it into zeros. Okay, in order to turn a 2 into a 0, I need to create a negative 2. So I am going to take negative 2 times row 2, add that to row 1 to make my new row 1. In order to get rid of a negative 4, I need a positive 4. So 4 times row 2 plus row 3 will be my new row 3. Row 2 is being used but not changing. So it is still going to be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2. And I'm going to get new entries across. So again, grab your calculator out here. In this case, I'm going to do the top row first. So negative 2 times 0 plus 1 stays a 1. Negative 2 times 1 plus 2 is 0. Negative 2 times 1 plus 1 is negative 1. And negative 2 times 2 plus 3 is also a negative 1. Slow me down, pause, do this on your calculator with me to make sure you're getting those same numbers out. Okay, so on the bottom row, if I take 4 times 0 plus 0, I get 0. 4 times 1 plus negative 4 is 0. 4 times 1 is 4 plus negative 2 is 2. And 4 times 2 is 8 plus negative 4 is 4. Now I have this column and this column in unit column form. So they're done. Keep moving down the diagonal for my next leading 1. I want to turn this 2 into a 1. I can do that again. This one has worked out very nicely. I can do that again with a quick multiplication without making things terrible. I could just do a half of row 3 for a new row 3. So rows 1 and 2 are not changing. And then I'm going to multiply everything through here by a half. So a half times 0 is 0, a half times 0 is 0, a half times 1 is 1, and a half times 4 is 2. I've created my leading 1. I want to use it now to turn those other entries into zeros, and at that point we should be done. So we're getting close. Okay, so in order to turn a negative 1 into a 0, I need a positive 1. So I'm going to take 1 times row 3, add that to row 1, and that will be my new row 1. To change a positive 1 into a 0, I need a negative 1. So a negative 1 times row 3 plus row 2 will be my new row 2. And this should carry me through to my final answer. So let's see, bottom row is not changing. Using it. Then I'm going to move across, and again, notice none of these undo any of that hard work that I've done in those first columns. Because if I take 1 times 0 plus 1, I get back 1. Oops, let me change back to my blue pen. And if I take 1 times 0 plus 0, I get 0. And 1 times 1 plus negative 1 is 0. 1 times 2 plus negative 1 is 1. Okay, I'm going to do that middle row, and then we should be finished. Negative 1 times 0 plus 0 is 0. Negative 1 times 0 plus 1 is 1. Negative 1 times 1 plus 1 is 0. And negative 1 times 2 plus 2 is also 0. Now all of my columns are in unit column form. I'm in this row reduced form. I can remind myself that probably these came from X, Y's, and Z's. They had already gotten rid of that to start this problem, but those are the variables. So I can read this across that X must be 1, Y must be 0, and Z must be 2. My ordered triple answer.